Hello. In this video I'm going to be talking about the custom timer asset and how to use it. So to get started, I'm just going to play all these timers real quick in the demo scene. And then we'll talk about how to use these. So let's play them in reverse now. Alright, so in our demo scene we have 20 timers underneath this timer canvas object, and we're going to be focusing mostly on this black and white timer here in the middle. So if we click on it, we'll see that there is this custom timer script, and that's going to be what you're mainly using. So let's talk about all the fields in this. First up, we have our duration. It's pretty self-explanatory. It is how long your timer will be running for in seconds. And so if I lower it down, you'll see it updates the text object on our timer here. Next we have count up or down. This is telling your text if it should start from 0 and count up to your duration, in our case 10, or should we start at 10 and count down to 0. Next we have fill up or down. This is related to that little black bar we see here. So on fill up we start empty and it fills up, and if we select fill down it'll start full and it'll fill down over time. Next up we have our rotation. So if I do this slider, you'll see here that we're rotating the images of our timer. So we could start our fill from the bottom up, from the bottom going around, if we set it to around 180, or anything in between. Next we have our flip fill direction. So if we check this, it'll flip the direction our images are filling and unfilling. So by default they fill up clockwise, and if we check that it'll fill up counterclockwise. Alright, so next up we have a few foldouts. Before we go into these, let's look at our object in the hierarchy and what it is comprised of. So we'll see we have 3 sprite objects and then 1 text object. This makes up the entire timer, and we're going to control all of the elements of these through these drop downs here. So let's open up the top sprite settings. And first we have enabled. This will turn it on or off. So if I turn it off, we'll see that our top sprite is this little white circle here. Next we have movement. So this is should the sprite fill up over time. If we click it, it'll kind of give us a sneak peek of what that'll look like when it's a little unfilled. Next we have our image object. This is the game object in the scene, in the hierarchy underneath your it's childed to this game object. You're just gonna drag this in here. Yeah, it's not from your project folder. You drag it from the hierarchy. Next we have our scale. So this will scale up our top sprite. So if I can make it a little bigger, and that kind of makes our black bar thinner, or we could make it smaller. Scale. And then we have color, so you can make it any color you want. And this also controls the opacity, so you can make it a little see-through if you want. Alright, next we have our middle sprite settings. It's the same thing, but let's talk about what the middle sprite is. So if we disable this, we'll see it's this black circle. It's underneath the top sprite, and it is above the bottom sprite. We have movement enabled here, so that gives us the effect of this bar filling up. If we uncheck it, then nothing will be moving right now. We could enable movement on the top sprite, and it will kind of look like this one above it, but let's not do that. Next we have our middle sprite image. This is the game object from this hierarchy you drag in. Then we have our scale, so we could make this a little bit, a lot bigger, or a little bit bigger. bigger, smaller, scale it as you want. And then color, you can change the color of this and the opacity. And then it's the same thing for the bottom sprite. So in this case, the bottom sprite is this little gray patch. We could turn it off and just have nothing when there's no bar. Or we could turn movement on, and this is pretty much the same thing as having it off because both this bottom sprite and middle sprite are moving at the same time and they're the same size. Our image object is the bottom sprite object from the hierarchy view. And then scale, we can make this a little bigger if we want, a little smaller, whatever you want to do. And color. Color, opacity, you know the deal. Alright, and finally we have our timer text settings. So this is the text that you see here. We can disable it if we want, we don't need to see it, we can just have the bar. We can enable milliseconds. If we do that, we probably want to scale the font size down a little. So that's the font size box, and then above it, the font size, we have the text object. This is like the previous foldouts, this is the game object. And then we have color. Make it any color you want. This also has opacity. Alright, so before we move on to the timer end event, I want to talk about some further customization you can do that is not in the script. So, say we want to change the sprite. Let's say we want to change this white top sprite. We're going to have to actually click on the top sprite object in our hierarchy. And under source image, we could select a ring. So, in our sprite folder, we have a circle, a plus icon, that's this one, and then a ring and a thick ring. So if we replace it with the ring, it'll give us this effect. But you can make it any sprite you want. You just have to do it through here. At this time, you can't do it from this main script. And then for the text, if you want to change the font, you also have to click on the object here and do that. And you also can make it italic or bold from here. And if you wanted to move it, let's say we want the text a little higher, you do that from here. You could rotate it too if you so wanted. But everything else is controlled through this main script. You can't like adjust it through here. It's just those couple of things you have to do manually. So let's talk about the timer end event. So this is called whenever the timer completes, whenever it runs for the duration. You can add anything you want here. You click this little plus, and then you'll have to drag an object in that you want to call a public function from. So let's do this object we're working on. You have to select a component here, so let's do our custom timer. And then we can say disable timer. So I've added 8 public functions to our custom timer script. In the documentation, I go over in detail what each one does, so you want to check that out for a really detailed explanation. But let's see disable timer in action real quick. So we're looking at this black and white one. I'll lower the duration a little bit, and we'll see that when it completes, it is going to disable. So it turned off here. We could change this to the destroy timer function, and when it completes, it's going to completely delete itself from the scene. So all gone. I have a couple functions in here called reverse count direction and reverse fill direction. That's what gave us our effect in the beginning of the timers completing and then reversing and going back the other way. So to do that, I set up these 3 functions to be called on the timer end event on all the timers. We reset it, then we reverse the count direction and the fill direction. So you can have more than one function being called on a single event. They'll be called in the order that they're listed here, so that matters. But let me really quickly create a new script and show you how you can make your own functions and link them to these timers. So we're going to create a C# script. I'll call it test script. We'll open it. And we don't need any of this stuff. So let's say public void print something. So in this function, when we call it, we're just going to print, hey, the event worked. Alright, save that. And now we can go into our scene. I'll just create a cube, drag this script on it, whoops. And then we can go back to our custom timer, add an event, drag in our cube. We'll find the test script component and select the print something function. So now when this timer ends, let's lower the time, we'll see that here it prints, hey, the event worked. So you can call any function you want, it just has to be public. Let's get rid of that. And the last thing I haven't covered yet is these 3 buttons. You've probably already seen me use them, but they will start the timer if you click it. If the timer is ended, it'll reset it and then start it, so you don't have to worry about reset, start. Just click start. You can pause it. If you hit start, it'll resume from where you paused it, and then reset will set your progress of the timer to 0 and then pause the timer. So more detail about the public functions being called here in the documentation. I recommend checking that out. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. And I do want to keep updating this, so if you have any suggestions or improvement ideas, please let me know.